Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inspiring Careers. My name's Dan Johnson, and I'm here today with my guest, Dr. Blake Morrison. He's the head of Global Medical and Scientific Affairs for Halozyme, and he is the founder of the World Myeloma Forum. Good morning, Blake. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you, Dan. Good morning to you, or good evening to you.
It's good evening to me. Now, for those watching, I'm over in the UK. Blake's over on in the California side of the States. So we're having this chat from very different time zones. Blake, I want to get straight into it, and I want to ask you my first question, which is, what are you most passionate about in your role? I know we've had a bit of a chat about sort of mentorships and things, but what do you find is the one thing that you are most passionate about when it comes to doing your job today?
So over the course of my career, I've seen significant changes in the way medical affairs functions in the biopharmaceutical industry, and that the change has really been quite an interesting and profound change. In that, when I first started my career, it was very didactic and very matter-of-fact type of work that we did. Today, it's much more nuanced and much more kind of innovative in terms of how we go about doing our work. So whether it's the content that we work with, or the tools that we work with, or the people that we interface with to do our work, it really has changed significantly. And that's the passionate part that I find, is the innovation and looking for new ways to innovate within the function, so that we continue to bring value to companies. The med affairs functions continue to bring value to companies, but do it in a way that is moving things forward versus very static and kind of old-fashioned.
Brilliant. And I mean, when I was kind of doing a bit of research about you, one of the ways you did kind of describe yourself was being very entrepreneurial. So I kind of had a feeling that that kind of answer would come up. You're a real kind of driver of innovation, and it really comes out in your answer. So my next question to you then, what are your top 3 success secrets that have helped you in your career? What's been kind of a driver behind that and getting to where you are today?
Yeah, 3. Okay, so number 1 is interesting. We were having this conversation last night with another colleague. Taking risks. I think that I have in many successful ways and in some unsuccessful ways taken risks that I think stuck my neck out a little bit far, and it's worked out in most instances. I think you have to be a risk taker to really be that innovator and to be really reach your full potential. So that has been, and it continues to be, a character trait that I make a commonality of my day-to-day activities. Relationships, the relationships, as in any industry and any role, we really function around relationships and successful nurturing relationships with both our colleagues internally within the companies, but also importantly external relationships with the thought leaders and our customers out in the institutions that we work with and interface with. And so being a person that believes in those relationships and really actively nurtures the relationships is key to success in the roles that I do. So 3rd, you think about that one. What would be my 3rd, motive for success? It kind of goes back to my first answer about innovation, and that is really embracing the tools of the trade to the fullest extent. My business, World Myeloma Forum, it's a technology company more than it is a med affairs company, and it utilizes contemporary technology platforms for building and sustaining relationships amongst healthcare providers and of different disciplines and things like that. And it really is kind of an innovative way to engage with a new audience. And so, really leveraging the tools of the trade and learning about them and doing the most with them has been really successful for me.
Brilliant. And do you know what? Those are three really good answers. I'm really glad that you mentioned those three things specifically, because I'm a big believer in those things myself. But when it comes to the risk side, and this is a big one because in people's careers, it's obviously very tempting to not necessarily take a back seat, but to kind of play it a bit safe because everyone wants to get the promotion, everyone wants to move up, and not many people want to do things which may ruffle feathers or could cause a kind of backstep in their career. So could you give us an example of a risk you took to take your career kind of forward in a way that you really had to think about, in a way that others may not have done?
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of, it is an intent to play it safe, and many times that's appropriate too. It depends on where you are in your career and how much risk that you can take, based on whether it be family or financial risks, that you have to have a fallback position if you're going to stick your neck out, right?
Yeah.
I have had the good fortune of being in a position here recently where, in companies in particular, I've joined a few organizations that were very high risk types of organizations, meaning that the work that they were doing, had it worked out, would have been immensely successful, very fulfilling, and probably also very financially rewarding. However, they didn't work out, and so but you learn in those processes, even in the failures, you learn. And so an example of this is I took a position with a company that probably had about a 90% chance of failure based on the kind of work in the therapeutic area that they were working in. And however, that 10%, if that 10% would have blossomed and we would have hit the endpoint that we needed to hit to commercialize the drug, that 10% would have been the most fulfilling experience in my career. The satisfaction that would have come from that achievement in succeeding in bringing a new therapy to a patient population of high unmet medical need, it was worth the risk. And I was fortunate enough that I could take that risk because, it didn't work out. And as a result, my position and my role was eliminated. But it still was worth it to me because I had a fallback position, and I was able to leverage that, that experience. While it was a failure for the company, it was a positive experience for me to be able to take the next step and go to another company, actually Halozyme, and continue to drive my career in the right direction.
And here's the thing that I think people would worry about in that situation is that although you had a fallback plan, it's always going to be an anxiety that, well, if this risk doesn't go the way I hope it would, what's going to happen next? And what were you going through for that moment? So I'm thinking that if someone's thinking of doing something similar at their point in their career, what advice would you give them that actually, because you went for the risk, that's going to look far more impressive, and that's something that people should put out there on their profiles and on their CVs? Where would someone in that situation go forward? What would you say to them?
Well, first and foremost, make sure you do have a plan B, and that you have the comfort and the buffer to be able to to not be working and not be generating an income, and that your family is not compromised as a result of that. So that's first and foremost. And but with that said, if you can, and it's a risk worth taking, you really have to go for it. I think you really have to put your whole commitment into taking that risk, and look at it as a means of gaining new knowledge and new experiences in those difficult situations. And really, if done properly, you can leverage that experience quite successfully, in that employers will appreciate someone who has been a bit of a renegade and has been a risk taker, if that was taken intelligently. To do it carelessly, then it can backfire on you. But if you do it intelligently, and you have a plan, and you can articulate that plan to a future recruiter, employer, things like that, you'll be rewarded. I personally, hire a lot of people over my career. I gravitate to those people who have been kind of those renegades and risk takers, the thrill seekers that I call them, because those people will understand me first and foremost, but I also appreciate people who are trying to move the rock up the hill, more so than the person who's just looking to, have a safe environment to do their work. Our work that we do requires people to take chances and to really put in high efforts to try to bring successful ventures to new patients. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the static minded. It really is for the thrill seekers. And so I think it can be very rewarding, both from a career wise, but also from taking those next steps and getting those promotions is to stick your neck out occasionally, but do it in a smart way.
Brilliant. That's really great advice. Thank you, Blake. Thanks for that. Okay, so my third question, if you could go back and change anything in your career, what would you change and why?
That's a hard question. I have taken, some really interesting paths in my career. And probably the one that I would have changed was around, and again, it goes back to risk, it was around leaving the pharmaceutical industry and starting my own consulting firm and business. So this is back in 2007. And, it was in a position where, again, I felt I could take that risk. I could start something new, and it was the timing was right to do it. What I would have changed is doing my homework a little bit more thoroughly to prepare for that experience and really understand from others who have gone through that transition from, employee to entrepreneur to business owner, and really understand what that meant. I didn't have a great appreciation of it when I launched into my business. And I had to learn on the run, and it made it for a much more difficult process. The success that I had with that venture was limited by the lack of experience that I didn't get before going into it, and consequently, it didn't sustain. I had to shut down the business because financially it wasn't going to be a successful venture. I learned a lot, and that's, looking back on it and based on what I just said, had I taken an extra 6 months and met with people who had gone through this process and really understand the steps that you have to take to be able to be successful, that would have been a wise investment in time and patience to get that information, and I just didn't do it.
Now, I'm really glad you brought that up, because there's two things there. First of all, you said you did that in 2007. So does that mean you started your own consultancy just before that global recession hit?
Correct.
So that must have been really, really challenging. First time going into your own consultancy business whilst going into a global recession must have made it really challenging. And secondly, the reason I'm asking this is because a lot of medical science liaisons are always asking me the question, where do I go with my career path once I'm done, or once I want to move forward, I should say, with being a medical science liaison? Did you take that career choice because you were thinking, okay, well, I've done this much in my career. Where do I go from here? Where's my kind of promotion? Where do I move forward? Or was it just because of the passion of wanting to do your own business? We'll start with the second question.
So you are correct. I started my venture, right before a global recession, and it was, that I couldn't have predicted that was going to happen, and that certainly impacted the success of the business. But to your question of what was the impetus for me to do it was really around the idea of being a business owner and the challenge of taking that really big step and becoming a business owner. And you sleep or lay awake at night thinking about the potential of taking this step, and it builds to the next step and builds to the next step, and it can take you in some really great places. And that was it for me. I mean, the experience that I had as an MSL really led me to be able to be well-rounded and enough so that I felt like I could leverage that experience to the venture. And frankly, there were moments where it was quite successful and it really did work out. But again, the recession hit, and that added an obstacle that was a big one. As a medical science liaison, a couple of things that I would mention there in terms of what comes next after being an MSL.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
And frankly, I would like to share with folks that don't think it's green. The grass is greener on the other side. I think there is a natural instinct that you want to take that position, take that experience, and take it internally into a company like where I am now with Halozyme, and apply those experiences to grow your career. And in many cases, you do have to take that path, to be able to grow your career. But I will caution people, especially those who really like the role of an MSL, the engagement with the thought leader community and the investigators, and just that whole exchange of science principles with folks. It really is a great job. And when you come inside and you lose that, if you love doing it and you lose that component of it, you may not be very happy. And I've experienced that, where working internal in companies like Halozyme, there have been times where I've just really felt like I'm missing the kind of the thrill of the engagement which you have with these folks. It's a great job, and I still think it's the best job in the biopharmaceutical industry, because you have the freedom of being able to kind of manage your time and your efforts and whatnot, and really get to interact with really interesting people. The internal work, many companies, can be grueling. It can be very unsatisfying, and so don't just instinctively think that it's going to be better on the inside. I actually right now am aligning myself for my next role in this industry, and I will be back in the field as an MSL of some form, because that's the role that I want to do. It's just much more satisfying to me to be in those kinds of roles versus in endless meetings in the internal bureaucracy of a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of MSLs are kind of weighing up. They know that they love being an MSL because they love being out in the field. They love talking to KOLs. That's a really, really big part of that engagement, that being on the move. But I think for this particular position, they're just wondering, where do we go? Because there's no natural kind of, you be for a lot of positions, it's say you do one position, you become a manager, you become a director, and so forth. But there's no natural path. So a lot of MSLs do ask me, it's like, do I go into contracting, because that's starting to pick now, the contract MSL field. Do I go into project management? Do I go into a kind of country medical manager role? There's no right or wrong answer, of course. It's not something I think's been particularly kind of set out yet, and a lot of companies are using MSLs with experience in different ways. But yeah, I think it's great advice to say, no, don't just think the grass is greener going on a senior internal role, because you're going to miss the things you love about being an MSL. And like you said, you want to go back to some of those things as well.
You could have a very high quality of life. I firmly believe that the quality of life, a complete life, with your families and friends, and having a professional career, and the entire experience is a very, very good role to be in. I like I said, I find it to be my natural instinct is to go back into it because of that.
Brilliant. So next question, what is the number one thing that you see that is holding other people back from being successful who do the job that you do?
The job I presently do?
Yes. So if you were talking to other global medical scientific affairs managers and directors, people that do those roles, what's the one thing that you think is holding them back from being successful?
I think that there's a long history, again, in the med affairs function of kind of a tried and true process of letting the science dictate the role, and you know, the Puritan approach of, you know, we only, you know, speak on science. We're not selling anything. We're not selling a product, and you know, you know, my integrity has to be grounded in, you know, pure and indisputable fact. And that in a way is true. I mean, we have to be grounded in science, and we have to be grounded in evidence that is factual, that can be defended and whatnot. However, as a function and as an individual, we're all selling something, and we have to recognize that we're selling something. And in Med Affairs roles, what you are selling is a philosophy. You're selling a company direction. You're selling a potential, you know, benefit to humankind in terms of new, you know, new drug entities or whatever you're bringing to the marketplace or trying to bring to the marketplace. So don't be naive and think that, you know, your role is just to be a fact generator or a fact deliverer. You know, you really do have to think about it as a job that you're trying to sell a concept. You're trying to influence and change people's minds. And that's okay. That's what we should be doing. And I've seen people who've taken the alternative approach, and it's very limiting in terms of yes, I mean, maybe your personal integrity is preserved and you feel good about yourself, but you're not doing a service to the greater good, because the information that you have isn't being shared where it needs to be shared for the benefit of the company, of mankind.
And when you say taking an alternative approach, I mean, are there particular approaches that you see and you think, you know, maybe come away from that? That's not doing the role. That's not doing the department, the company, as much service as you think it is. Do you have any examples?
Yeah, I mean, early in my career, I had an experience with, I was a new kind of blossoming MSL, and I was out working with my colleagues and learning from them about how to do the job. And I was with this one particular lady who was providing me guidance, and she I remember this vividly. She tells me, she says, you know, never let the company compromise your integrity by making you go out and say something that you don't believe in. And I said, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then I saw her true colors when she applied that principle for herself in a meeting where she got up and told a senior leader in the company that she could care less how successful the company is, as long as the medicine helps a patient. That's all that matters. Wow. The company profits, the company success, the company this, the company that, doesn't matter to me. And I thought, wow, you know, that's taking this kind of, you know, scientific puritanism to a level that really is off-putting. You know, that you should be passionate about helping humankind, and that's a good thing. Yep. But you should care about the success of your company, who's paying your salary, who's giving you the opportunity to do this great job that, you know, enables all the flexibility and the quality of life. So to get that kind of high horse and you know, the attitude of me versus, you know, the we, really bothered me a lot. And that's what I mean by an alternative course. And you see that from time to time with other people, is that it may be more prevalent, especially in the larger companies, where there is this, you know, such a compartmentalized thinking about what role that you play. And you know, I think it can be not only disserving to the company, but to one's career if they get so single-minded that they can't see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the wrong type of risk taking. It sounds like it's, as you said, they kind of got up on a bit on their high horse and all that, but maybe in their mind they thought that, you know, this is the kind of risk I'm going to take for my career because I think I'm sounding passionate, when actually it's kind of not. Was that the case, or have I got that a little bit wrong?
It was absolutely the case. I mean, you know, that person, I don't know where they are. That was 20 years ago. But nevertheless, I mean, it was career limiting. In that instance, in that company, that person did not have any upward mobility from that point forward.
Yeah, I can imagine. But all right, fine. So one of the things, as I said, I mentioned this right at the start, is that you're a really big believer in mentorships. Now, how? I mean, maybe you could give us some insights and why you're such a big believer in mentorships, and let us know how could someone, once you shared that, how could someone go about getting a mentor? What type of or what person should they approach who would be a good mentor? Can you give us a bit about why you're such a believer of this?
I'm a believer of it because I've seen it actually work, and it really was introduced to me by someone who was seeking a mentor, out of the kind of out of the blue, and with the utilization of new technologies like LinkedIn and whatnot. A young aspiring professional reached out to me on LinkedIn and introduced herself and said, listen, I want to, I've looked at your career, I've looked at your history, and I'd like to understand how I can become an MSL. I like that role, but I'm having trouble breaking in. And so we had a conversation, and it eventually led to an opportunity where we met, and it's a relationship now 7 years old, where I continue to have, 3 or 4 times a year we talk and provide some guidance, and I actually learn a lot from her these days, because I've seen her career follow a nice path where she has been able to to take the guidance and get the experience and take the next step and the next step and the next step. And it's been really satisfying to watch that, and I can learn from her, because I can then come back to her and say, how did that work out? Was my advice was it good? Did it work? Did it not work? And so it's been really satisfying to see instances like that where people have been able to grow. In another way, I'm a pharmacist by training, so. Yep. Nearby where I work and live is a very prestigious pharmaceutical school at UC San Francisco, and at a company before this, I had an opportunity to have interns, and so we had pharmacy interns come to our company and work in different capacities. And so it was mentoring a pharmacist into the industry and how to navigate the industry to leverage their skills. And we had 2 interns who, over the course of now about 5 years, they were able to graduate very successfully from pharmacy school. And both of them are leaders in our industry at their late 20s, early 30s, very young. But they are extremely successful. One is an MSL and 27 years old, out there, working for a very successful company and just doing a great job with it. The other works as a consultant and actually, works with me as a consultant. And so here again, there's a circle of life where, in some cases, what I've been able to help these folks do, it comes back to help me, is that they're helping me grow my business and grow, and be successful in my role through this relationship. So it's been very satisfying.
Brilliant. And going back to your the MSL that you mentored, was there anything over their career where, whether it was your advice or through their own discovery, that you really saw was a real kind of game changer for their career, a real eureka moment, something that really took them from a good MSL to a brilliant one? Did anything in particular stand out?
Yeah, there was actually. In this particular case is when she got fired.
Okay.
So it was traumatic for her.
Yeah,
it was
of course,
traumatic for me to watch that play out, because she was again using some of my guidance and advice. But it gets back to really assessing your risk profile at that moment to determine if I should take that risk. And this was an individual who I think miscalculated a little bit on where she was in her career in terms of how influential her experience was going to be for being able to take that next step. And she got arrogant. and that arrogance led to her, actually being removed from her role. And so that setback grounded her in the ideas of, kind of marching through at the pace that you should march through, and making sure you have your backup plan before you take the risk. It took about 4 months, but she was able to, get back into the employment ranks of the employed, got back into an MSL role, and from there was much more strategic in her thinking about how to navigate, and has done, quite brilliantly since then in terms of growing her career, making changes at the right time that enabled her to be successful versus trying to go too fast or trying to be too aggressive, too arrogant.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's one of those funny things, isn't it? It can often take something like, getting fired or redundancy to really make a real kind of shift and change in mindset. Because it is, as you rightly said, it is so traumatic that it just really kind of sparks that something's got to change. I've got to have a different approach. I've got to out and find a much better way of doing things. Yeah, so I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it's something which people get scared of, but actually it can be a good thing. It's just hard to see ahead of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been fired in my career, and from that experience, I've learned a lot. And so I think that, again, I don't aspire people to go out and get fired, but at the same time, don't let that be self-limiting in terms of being afraid to take a risk. Be strategic when you take a risk, so that that if something bad were to happen, there is a plan B that you can quickly implement, and you'll learn through that process. Absolutely learn through that process.
Brilliant. So, next question: take a look into your crystal ball. What does the future of medical affairs hold, and how do you think it will evolve?
So, as I said earlier in the discussion, over the course of my career, medical affairs has evolved quite a bit, and it used to be, very much a reactive kind of matter-of-fact type of service, to where we're much more now involved in the actual execution of the product life cycle and the success of the product in the prescribing community. And I continue to see that will evolve even further. The way our industry is being regulated these days, more and more constraint is being placed on the commercial team, so the field sales reps and the like, whereas they're able to do less. And we hear also from clinicians is that they want to interact with pharma in a way that brings value to their practice and to their patients. And that's where, having a scientist or a clinical person interacting with those clinicians, the customers, there's a more peer-to-peer level exchange between those two, and the value that's derived from that. And so I see that Med Affairs will continue to evolve into not truly commercial, but supporting commercial efforts more and more all the time. And that poses some challenges in terms of how compliance factors into it and so forth. But at the end of the day, for the Med Affairs to really bring value to companies, they need to be, delivering messages. And that's an area that I've seen grow, and we have to continue to grow it and really be a major component of bringing information and the intended message to the prescribing community, so that the product and the service can be used most effectively and bring most value to patients. And I think that's where we're going.
Cool, brilliant answer. Thanks so much for that, Blake. All right, Blake, we're now about to go into our quick fire round. This is where I'm going to ask 5 quick questions about yourself, where you just give me the first answer that comes to mind. So, Blake, are you ready for our quick fire round?
I am ready.
Brilliant. Let's get into it. Okay, Blake, question 1 of the quick fire round. What is your favorite movie?
Pulp Fiction.
Cool. Great answer. Question 2. What has been your favorite holiday?
Christmas, without question.
Cool. Second person to say Christmas on Inspiring Careers. I do love that answer. It's a great answer. Question number 3. What has been the most influential book of your career?
That's an interesting one. I'd say probably the Merck Manual. The Merck Manual is a medical reference that's used, by a variety of different disciplines. The name Merck implies the company that published it, Merck Pharmaceutical Companies. And when I was a pharmacy student and an early pharmacist in my career, it was the Bible. That's where you'd go to, get information and learn about what you need to do to be most effective in your role. And so I'd say that really had a big part of my career development was that book.
Cool. Brilliant. Question 4. What is your favorite song?
That's a hard one. Katy Perry, Rise.
Great answer. I don't think anyone said Katy Perry yet, but it's a great song and I do love it as well. And the final question of the quick fire round. What is your most favorite thing to do outside of work?
I spend a lot of time with my family. My kids are both swimmers, and so my social life evolves and revolves around their swimming. So I do a lot of swim meets, and I'm very active at those swim meets in terms of doing different roles for the meets to be successful. So I've really grown to like that.
Cool. Excellent. All right, Blake, I've got one final question that I'd like to ask for everyone watching. What is the final piece of advice that you'd give to anyone who's watching this video today?
Well, we've been talking a lot about risk, and kind of the line of questioning and whatnot. And it's, for me, I think it is important that you do take risks at different times in your career, but it's so important to know what your risk profile is at those different times and really actively understand that risk profile and apply it, because you don't want to be taking big risks when you don't have a fallback position or a buffer zone that, should the risk, lead you down an unfortunate path, you have to be able to, recover from that and do so without compromising your family or your lifestyle and things like that. So really understanding your risk profile as it applies to your career, I can't overemphasize how important that is.
Cool. Great piece of advice. Great answer. Okay, Blake, that brings us to the end of the episode. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Inspiring Careers. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Blake, I've got a feeling that there's going to be people watching this who will want to ask questions, who are going to want to get in touch, especially probably about mentorship, as you described that so brilliantly at the start of the show. If anyone wants to ask you a question, is it okay for them to send you a message or connect with you on LinkedIn? Would that be all right?
Yes, that would be perfectly fine.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, if you have any questions for Blake, likewise, you can ping him to myself or get in touch with him on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for watching Inspiring Careers. Please do like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video below. And I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you again, Blake. Take care.
Thank you very much, Dan.